Do you know the Muffin Man? No, that is
song.
Creepy. What?
It's like my favorite song next to Tiptoeing Through the
Tulips. That is not
very diverse.
Fucking creepy at all. At all. But it goes with our story today. Anyway, hey there, true crime enthusiasts. Welcome to another episode of Case Files with Kat
and Ashley.
Should we do it now?
Sure.
Should we do it now? Okay. Well, we have the wizard has sent me a text that he said,
"Oh, I can't wait for this."
Oh my god. That I'm supposed to read. Ashley agreed to read it, but I'll go ahead and just do it. Okay.
She has not seen it yet.
I have not seen it. So I'm opening up the text and it says...
I can't. Okay. I'm sorry.
This is from Cringe Pics Community on Reddit. It says, "You were the fat dude who stunk." That's the title of it. And it says, "You stunk up the line in Kroger. You paid for your Pez with quarters and had an unwiped ass. I was the guy behind you in blue. You waved as you drove away on your Vespa scooter. Reach out here if you see this." I want to know who that was and why the wizard wanted me to read that.
Maybe the wizard wrote the post.
Was the wizard the fat dude who stunk?
Oh, come on.
I don't know. That's weird. Why would he want us to write that?
He's your husband.
I don't
understand.
know. I'm so confused. That was stupid, Jason. Okay, but we have something better to open than that. Womp womp. We don't get your humor. Anna, our wonderful listener, Anna sent us a gift. Do you want to open it?
Yes. Okay.
Open it. So we opened.
The wizard's very adamant about you guys hearing us open it.
We did have to open.
Oh, there's a letter.
Oh, there's a letter. Oh, let's read it.
Do you want me to read it? Do you want to read it?
Oh, let's read it. Hold on. Oh my gosh, it's really long.
While you read, I'll take the thing.
Okay, it says, "Kat and Ashley, I was going to write this using cut and paste, but that seemed like a lot of work. Sorry this has taken so long to get this to you. Life has gotten in the way. Got married, bought a house, had a kid, full on adulting. Way to go. We're proud of you."
Woo!
I know I packed it full of paper. Didn't want any to be busted. I grabbed some treats for your pets. I hope chicken is okay. Ray, my husband, and I had a lot of fun picking out y'all's drinks. Kat, yours were the easiest. We love IPAs. Yeah. Ashley, the left-handed stout was the first beer I actually liked. The something PFRIEM was my first IPA. Y'all are having my firsts. A lot of my friends tell me that cider is really good. The other I just thought looked pretty. Hope it's good. The other two IPAs are from local breweries. Anything from Crux is good. I really like the Ghost Captain. Thought these were both appropriate for the show. Ooh, I like that name. I'm not going to go into her personal life. Anyway, listening to y'all when I can has helped me fill my social cup. I'm so grateful for you both. I know this year has been rough for the both of you. Just know y'all are loved by so many friends, family, and listeners. Thanks for your crazy stories and the laughs. Maybe not so much for the times y'all freak me out, but love the show. Cheers to y'all. Enjoy the drink. Stay safe. Your friend, Anna. P.S. Ashley, if you ever come across a Ryan draft beer, get it. It's a Japanese lager. Only lager I like. So good on a hot summer day.
Okay.
Thank you, Anna.
Oh, this is yours.
Ooh, the Ghost Captain Space Hop IPA
that can
is
looks awesome.
Gorgeous. Oh my God. Oh, this is a
can.
huge ass can. This is the Boneyard Beer RPM IPA.
Like, she wasn't kidding about how well she packed this stuff.
Oh my gosh. Like nothing's bent or nothing. Oh my gosh. Yeah, you guys are going to be hearing all about these beers the next couple of episodes. So get ready. Yeah.
That's you.
Oh, hazy IPA. Oh yeah. Okay. I can't wait. That's so cute. I can't pronounce that. Sorry.
Oh,
there's going to be a lot of IPAs, I think.
Lager beer.
That's for you. I'll give you the other ones. The non-IPAs.
And this is the milk stout.
Ooh, that was her first beer she liked.
So we each got
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Anna. We appreciate you. If anybody else wants to send us beer. Oh yeah, dog and cat treats. Yay. Thank you guys. That's so sweet. Oh my gosh, the kitties are gonna. The kitties. There's now Louie, and we have socks. So, okay, leave the paper. Leave the paper. Just leave it. Just leave it. We're not gonna repack it. Just shove it off the table.
Like literally, just shove it.
Yeah, just shove it off the table. It's fine.
Leave it on the table.
All right. So here we go. So, in light, I'm just gonna get into the story since we just.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you so much. Okay, so in light of this summer making 50 years since these brutal slayings ended, I wanted to revisit our very first show, now no longer available, the story about the Candyman, Dean Corll. And some of you may have not had the chance to hear it since we don't have it up anymore. Thank goodness. But those of you that did will get a different episode than last time. For starters, no commercials. Haha.
Yes.
Winning already. But anyway, it was an interesting refresher to go back over this case. Like I didn't save the script I used last time. So I really just started from scratch and reread with fresh eyes, like, you know, some of the stories that I'm really using as my resources, my references here. So as I mentioned a few weeks ago, this was, it's been 50 years, so I wanted to revisit the story. So because it was on August 8th, 1973, that a sweating 17-year-old named Elmer Wayne Henley led police to a metal boat shed in southwest Houston where he and two other killers had been burying the bodies of some of his own teenage friends. Gross.
I lost Kevin.
You did. He's somewhere under the paper, sorry.
Oh, I found him.
Okay. So inside the boat shed were the graves of boys ages 13 to 20 who had been tortured and raped before being murdered by a 33-year-old man named Dean Corll, also known as the Candyman. So this comes from one of my main sources. It's from the Texas Monthly article by a man named Skip Hollinsworth, and it's an article called The Lost Boys. So I'll be referring to The Lost Boys several times. So this comes from that. By the next day, police officers were exhuming bodies from a wooded area named near Sam Rayburn Reservoir outside Lufkin and on a beach at High Island east of Houston. Some of the bodies were covered with a layer of lime powder and shrouded in clear plastic, their faces looking up at the men uncovering them. Others were nothing more than lumps of putrefied flesh. A few had tape strapped across their mouths. Others had nylon rope wrapped around their necks or bullet holes in their heads. One boy was curled up in a fetal position. Within a week, the remains of 27 young males had been found, a couple of them as young as 13, one as old as 20. The New York Times quickly labeled the killings, quote, the largest multiple murder case in United States history. The phrase serial killer had not yet been coined, surpassing the 13 women choked to death by the Boston Strangler in the early 60s, the 16 people shot by Charles Whitman in 1966 from the tower at the University of Texas, Austin, and the 25 internment workers killed by Juan Corona in California just 2 years earlier. Soon reporters began flying to Houston from every corner of the United States. A few arrived from as far away as Japan and Pakistan, even Truman Capote, hoping to revive his floundering career and produce his next In Cold Blood, showed up wearing his signature Panama hat, smoking cigarettes, and being trailed by an entourage of assistants. It wasn't just the number of murders that caught everyone's attention. Of the victims, the medical examiner's office was able to identify at least 20 of them had been residents of either the Heights or an adjoining neighborhood, or they were Houston boys who had been somewhere in the Heights right before they disappeared. All of the Heights victims had gone missing between December 13th, 1970 and July 25th, 1973. 11 of them had attended the same junior high. How Capote and everyone else wanted to know, was it possible that so many boys could have been snatched away from one working class area of Houston, a mere 2 miles wide and 3 miles deep, without anyone, police, parents, neighbors, teachers, or friends, snapping to what was happening?
Uh-huh.
And that was like just the beginning
Yeah.
of that. And it's such a great article. So definitely go. And because 2 by 3, 2 miles by 3,
Yeah.
they were like a street away from each other. And sometimes like they
Yeah.
lived on the street behind one another, you know, like, sorry, that was my phone. So let's just start from the beginning. We'll start with Dean's early life.
Okay.
There's a couple of different articles that come out over the, subsequent 50 decades, obviously. And I will reference those. I will give them a name. But one of the things that I don't reference it too much. But one of the things that right away people have to keep in mind as I tell this story, that this was in the 70s and homosexuality was not as accepted as it is now. And so there was just a lot of self-hate. And then it was the Heights. And if you don't know, if you aren't from Houston, back then the Heights was super lower working class. It wasn't, what it had started out as, and it isn't what it is now.
Yeah.
Now you can't afford to live there. It's so expensive
Yeah.
and gentrified, and it's gorgeous and so cute and fun. And there's all kinds of cute restaurants and all these kinds of things. But it's, but back in the day, it was like these weren't, if it were River Oaks, which is the nicer part of Houston, people would be like, oh, wait a minute. That's where the kids are going missing.
Yeah.
And so so you have to kind of put all of those little bits in a context. Anyway, so we'll go with Dean Corll. So Dean Arnold Corll was born on Christmas Eve, 1939 in Fort Wayne, Indiana. He was the first child of Mary Emma Robison and Arnold Edwin Corll. So now Corll's dad was pretty strict. He was like the strict disciplinarian figure, and mom was just really sweet and loving towards her children and very protective of her boys. So this is not to mean that strict meant abusive, but it was also 1939, and strict would probably now be abusive.
Yeah.
Right.
There's definitely different standards.
There is such a different standard. Like, people don't spank anymore. Like, people frown upon that really. And,
Yeah.
there's not. So, I mean, could he have been a disciplinarian by today's guidelines? He might have been probably a little abusive by today's guidelines,
Yeah.
I'm just saying. So different times. But that's my guess. He was probably physical, but not to the point of like him losing his life. I think his mom was very protective, would have allowed that. He was definitely a mama's boy. Anyway, well, the marriage with Mr. Corll wasn't smooth sailing at all. They were fighting a lot, leading to a divorce in 1946. Just 4 years after their younger son, Stanley Wayne Corll, came into the picture. Mary then sold her home, set up shop in a trailer home in Memphis, Tennessee, so that they could still keep in touch with their dad, who had joined the Air Force. So she didn't completely take them away, but that's where she was. So as a kid, Dean was probably considered a bit of an introvert. He didn't socialize much, but he was still really nice to others. He had a soft spot for other people. At age 7, he got rheumatic fever, which went undiagnosed until doctors found a heart murmur in 1950. And then that led him to having to skip PE classes.
Oh, no.
Lucky. So
Silver lining.
Silver lining. But that probably made him even more of an outcast because you can't participate in sports. And that's probably, what you do. I mean, that's what you do, right? So Dean's parents tried to patch things up and they got remarried in 1950, but then that, 3 years later that ended. They moved to Pasadena, Texas, just outside of Houston. And that reunion they were divorced by 1953. And Mama Mary held on to custody, but the boys were still allowed to keep in touch with their dad. Like, it wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
She wasn't fleeing, but they just weren't happy.
Yeah.
So after the second divorce, Mama Mary tied the knot with a traveling clock.
Wow.
Might as well. Let's just say what we're all thinking. No. A clock salesman named Jake West, and they decided to move to Vidor, Texas. Yeah. If you don't know where that is or what that is.
It's an interesting choice.
It is. It's an interesting choice. It's, one of those, if you're not white, you don't want to be there when the sun goes down kind of communities. Some people would have said it's the capital of the KKK kind of community. I don't know. It's very, very white. You don't want to speed if you're going through there. Anyway, just don't speed. So that's where his half-sister was born, Joyce. And the family even started a candy company, and they were working day and night, and with Dean and his brother keeping the candy making machines going, they were doing the thing. So Dean attended Vidor High School from 54 to 58, and he was very well behaved. He played trombone and the bass in the brass band. And again, he was a bit of a loner, but he did go on a few dates with girls here and there, but a bit of a loner. So after graduating, the family moved closer to Houston and they set up shop there. So in 1960, Dean went to live with his grandma in Indiana for a while. And he formed a close bond with a girl there, but he rejected her marriage proposal in 1962. Which is weird.
Yeah.
It's kind of progressive, right? For 1962. Marry me. But so after almost the 2 years in Indiana, he returned to Houston to help his mom with the candy business. So Dean's mom divorced the clock salesman and started a new candy company. And then Dean took a more prominent role in that business. In 1963, he was like the vice president of something. Like, he got some nicer title. Anyway, but in 1963, a teen employee accused Dean of making advances, leading to the employee's firing. They have laws against that kind of stuff now. They don't do that.
I was going to say up until that point, he sounded like a very normal person, and then you went into that. But I was just thinking, he sounds like, nothing sounds like what would
normally,
what we hear a lot when we talk about.
There are no red flags. There's no like, that boy didn't stand a chance.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But he was also a self-hating gay man.
Yeah.
Right? And so he was probably staying to himself.
Yeah.
Because he didn't see himself in anyone near him and around him. So he was probably like, I better just stay to myself.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Dean got drafted into the Army in 1964, but he didn't enjoy it. He managed to get himself discharged in 1965 because he said that he needed to be at home with his mom to help her with the business. After leaving the military, though, that's when he really started to seem to explore his sexuality, and his friends started to notice there would be a change change in him when he was around teenage boys.
Weird.
That's probably where he was kind of stuck.
Yeah.
He probably still saw himself young and, whatever. So Dean's Army service did provide him with an escape from the family, but he needed to be back where he could maybe be more free.
Yeah.
So he needed to get out of the Army. So after his honorable discharge from the Army, everything's looking good right now. Corll made his way back to Houston Heights, where he slipped back into the role of vice president of the Corll Candy Company. It's a lot of C's. It's worth noting that his former stepdad, the clock salesman, held on to ownership of the previous candy company, which was the Pecan Prince. So they had to start this other Corll candy company. So there was some competition between the two. Anyway, so much like his teenage years, Dean kicked things into high gear, pouring more hours into the candy business. He demanded the demand for the family's product was on the rise. That was partly because he started to give out a lot of free candy to local kids. If they walked by, he'd be like, "Here, have some candy." I mean, it is like he must have written that stereotype.
Don't take candy from strangers.
Don't take candy from a stranger.
Yeah.
So he was just giving out the candy. He was the candy man. So in 1965, Corll Candy Company packed its bags and relocated to 22nd Street, setting up shop right across from Helms Elementary School. Curiously, Corll had a habit of handing out free candy to local kids. So that just worked even better where they were located, especially to the teenage boys. He really,
Louis found our box.
Oh, and he's going to lick that tape. And then his tongue's going to get stuck on it. Look.
He's enjoying the gift as well, Anna.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Should I move the box or just let him have his tape? Have his moment.
It's not going to be a moment. It won't be.
I'm sorry, Louis.
Just a moment.
I was forced to do it, Louis. I'm sorry. Blame your mother.
Sorry. Okay.
Okay.
So, so the Candyman was one of his nicknames. Another one was the Pied Piper, which is also unfortunate. Like, if that's early on, that's terrible. The company had a small team working for them, and Corll's interactions with teenage male employees often carried a flirtatious undertone. But interestingly enough, Corll even set up a pool table in the back of the candy factory, and it became like the gathering spot for these local teenagers in the Heights and the employees and everything. And so it was just like the employees plus local youths. He just was making things like worse for himself at this point. He had a van that he even like put carpet in and like couches in it and a TV in it. And he'd be like, "Come on, kids, let's go to the beach." And so these were like some elementary school kids, some junior high kids, some, teenagers. And
was it a white van?
Oh my God, with no windows? I don't know. They don't describe.
I'm just wondering if he started all the stereotypes.
I know. He wrote free candy on it. Anyway, but still, the carpet and the couches and the TV, you might as well. So one by one, teenage boys did start disappearing, and a chilling realization that a serial killer was among them did not happen for a long time. So this comes from an excellent piece from the Houston Chronicle. It's by Lisa Olson. It's an opinion piece. It came out actually just a few days ago on the 19th of August. So just a few days ago, called "Why Dean Corll, the Candyman Killer, Should Still Give You Nightmares."
Oh,
I know. So this is from her piece. "For 4 years, I have been conducting interviews and re-examining the implications of the long-delayed identifications of 7 of Corll's victims. Identifications made relatively recently through the efforts of Dr. Sharon Derrick, a forensic anthropologist, and other experts based at the Harris County Institute of Forensic Sciences. The work of Dr. Derrick and others has provided vital answers to mothers, sisters, and brothers whose pleas went unanswered 50 years ago when the Harris County DA's office rapidly closed the case of the Houston mass murders. Indeed, Derrick confirmed to me that there were at least 30 victims. Other investigators I interviewed believe there may have been as many as 40. Though most of the homicide victims had been immediately reported as missing by their families, their disappearances had largely gone uninvestigated. Police had insisted nearly all of these boys were runaways, not murder or kidnapping victims. But 30 or 40?
Yeah.
Because we say 20.
Well, that's a stretch.
We say 28. But was it?
No, I mean that like they ran away. Like I'm saying it was a stretch that like 40 ran away.
In a 2 by 3 mile area. What?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I meant by that's a stretch.
Yeah. Like they were just insistent. And they would be like assholes about it. Like, what are you doing here? He's a runaway. Go away.
Wow.
Yeah, they were jerks about it. So let's, so the investigation into the disappearances revealed the true context of Dean Corll's atrocities. He had accomplices, David Brooks and Elmer Wayne Henley, and they would play a pivotal role in unraveling the horrifying truth behind these missing boys. So let's meet them. Let's meet these two kids. So in 1967, Corll befriended 12-year-old David Owen Brooks. He was a 6th grader, wore glasses. He was one of the many that got free candy from Dean. Brooks initially became one of Dean's companions. He was always socializing with the other teenage boys and things like that in the back room, in that little back part of the factory. He also would go on those beach trips to South Texas that Dean took those kids on. Dean was the first adult male that didn't make fun of David.
Oh. It's kind of sad.
It's very sad. He had, this was somebody who didn't make fun of him for looking like he was just this scrawny kid, wore glasses, probably got picked on, and he was not picked on or when he was around Dean. And Dean was always really nice to him. There wasn't ever like, oh, you look like a sissy boy or whatever. Like he never did anything like that. And so that made him not only like Dean Corll, but look up to him and bond with him because he didn't have that at home. He didn't have a dad that liked him at home. Right. And so that was just really, really sad. Whenever Brooks told Corll that he needed cash, he gave him money. Whenever he needed a place to stay to get away from his father, he had a place to stay to get away from his father. Whatever he needed.
I hate that Dean Corll became such a horrible person because he sounds like such a good guy at this point. You know what I mean? It's so sad.
But then...
Well, that's what I said. It's sad. He became such a horrible person.
But then, yeah. But then, he did all these favors for David Brooks, and eventually, he convinced him to go into a sexual relationship with him, in 1969, and it was sort of like, I do things for you, you do things for me kind of a situation. And it wasn't because Brooks was gay. He wasn't. He had a girlfriend, eventually had a girlfriend and all that kind of stuff. But he was like, I looked up to this man and he was so kind and it wasn't that big of a deal to me. And so that's what I did for him.
Wow.
And then he, in 1969, he started to pay Brooks with cash or gifts to allow him to perform fellatio on him. So he was getting something in return for that, So Brooks's parents were divorced. His father lived in Houston. His mom had lived in Beaumont, but he was living with his mom. And so when he would visit Houston, he would... to visit his father, he would also visit Corll, and he would allow Brooks to stay in his apartment. And then when he moved back to Houston, Brooks began regarding Corll's apartment as his second home. So, that was by his own admission, that was his second home. That was his safe place. Crazy, right? Yeah. In retrospect. So this is from the Texas Monthly article, again, The Lost Boys. But Corll wasn't exactly like his neighbors. So this is kind of like skipping backwards a little bit. At some point after his mother left Houston, which was in 1968, he decided to embrace a compulsion he had apparently kept secret for years. He began inviting teenage boys over to his apartment, some of whom he had been eyeing since his days at the candy factory. One of those boys was David Brooks. After he arrived, Corll persuaded him to pull down his pants, at which point Corll dropped to his knees and began performing what the Texas criminal statutes at the time called oral sodomy. According to those who knew Brooks, the introspective young teenager was not gay. In fact, he had a girlfriend who lived in the Heights. Quote, "But you have to understand that Dean had become David's father figure," said Brooks's attorney Skelton. "He had taken care of him, given him money when he needed it, and let him stay with him whenever David needed to get away from his real dad. You know, a man like that can have a lot of influence over a young, insecure boy." It wasn't long, though, before Brooks realized that Corll was driven by much darker needs. In mid-December, Brooks, who was then 15, walked unannounced into Corll's apartment. In the confession he gave police 2.5 years later, he said he saw 2 naked boys tied to Corll's bed. Corll was also naked and was molesting them. "What are you doing here?" Corll snapped, and Brooks turned around and left. Later, he said Corll told him that he was a part of a gay pornography ring and that he had been paid to send those boys out to California to pose for photos. At some point, Brooks said Corll changed his story. He told Brooks he had killed those boys and buried them in the storage shed. It's likely that those 2 boys were Jimmy Glass and Danny Yates, best friends who lived in the Spring Branch area of Houston. Both were 14, and they had come to the Heights on Sunday night, December 13th, with Jimmy's father and older brother Willie to attend an anti-drug youth rally and worship service at a church called the Evangelistic Temple. Jimmy and Danny sat toward the front. During the middle of the service, recalls Willie, who's now 64 and a retired Houston firefighter, I saw them walk up an aisle as if they were going to the restroom, and that was it. They basically vanished into thin air. So he was 15 when his brother was 14. The Yates brother was 15 when his younger brother was 14. In an interview with Fox 26 a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, he said he'd met Dean Corll when he pulled over to pick up his brother, Danny. And he said the first thing out of his mouth was, "Hey, do you guys want some beer?" That's the first thing he asked. My brother said yes. He, however, didn't take Dean Corll up on his offer for beer. He gave my brother his phone number and told him anytime he wanted some more beer, he should call him. A couple of days later, Yates and Danny and his friend Jim Glass went to a church service. He would never see his only brother ever again. So, if anybody had asked that kid,
yeah,
nobody asked that kid. Like they didn't investigate. There was no investigation done on any of these kids. It's really sad. After the murders of Danny and Jimmy, Corll moved to a new apartment 5 miles northwest of the Heights. The man moved a lot. And every time, he probably didn't want to stay for fear of like being noticed in an area too much.
Yeah.
So on January 30th, 1971, he struck again, but this time he had a helper. He and Brooks drove into the Heights and saw 2 boys, 15-year-old Danny Waldrop and his 13-year-old brother Jerry, who were on their way to a bowling alley. They ended up at Corll's new apartment. Brooks said in his confession that he watched as Corll strangled them. Although the Waldrop's home was only half a mile from the church where Jimmy and Danny disappeared, the police did not investigate. The Waldrop's father, Everett, a burly divorced construction worker, later told the Houston Chronicle that he filled out missing persons reports at the police department, then camped on the police department door for 8 months. I was there about as much as the chief was, but all they said was, "Why are you here? You know your boys are runaways."
A shitty thing to do. My God, you at least pretend you're looking. Fuck.
The murders would have stopped right then if Brooks had just gone to the police, right? aren't we all screaming this? I mean, like, I was like, because he's just a kid, but, you know.
Yeah.
But Brooks didn't have it in him to turn in his father figure, basically.
I mean, he'd been grooming him since he was 12.
I mean, so yeah, not sure what else to do. Brooks dropped out of high school. He didn't, I mean, he's in this now. He's in this. He's fucked up, probably getting drunk and high all the time. And he's like, he was a freshman. He dropped out of high school. And so now he's spending more time with Corll. And as a reward for his loyalty, Corll gave him a green Corvette for his 16th birthday. So now he's got him right where he wants him.
Yeah.
I mean, your own dad isn't even doing that kind of shit for you.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's a bribe, maybe, but like love.
Like some people should have been asking questions where this 16-year-old high school dropout got a Corvette.
Yeah, where's he living? I mean, is he living with Corll at this point?
I would assume
like he's back and forth. Who knows? I don't know. It's the only man that's shown him any kindness. Okay, so backing up it a bit. Like I said, in 1968, Corll's mom got rid of the business and moved. Well, she and his half-sister Joyce, they moved to Colorado after that third marriage failed because on the advice of a psychic who told her, you need to get away from this man and move as far away as you can.
Like away from Dean?
Away from the ex-husband. But yeah,
okay.
Now that I say that, it sounds like maybe she was like, you need to go get away from Dean.
Wow.
Right?
That's crazy.
Now that I say that, damn, maybe that's what.
Well, that's what I was asking. I didn't know if she meant like Dean or which man.
Dun, dun, dun. Anyway, although she often talked to her eldest and maybe favorite, his mother never saw him again. That was the last time. I was listening to the last podcast on the left, guys, and they were saying, like, if she ever admitted, like, she was his biggest supporter, she never, like, probably till the day she died, believed that he did any of these things or that he was gay or that whatever.
Yeah.
Like, she, and he said, one of them said, like, but like, that's a true narcissist, right? If there's something wrong with him, then there's something wrong with her. So she's never going to admit that there's anything wrong with him, because it would be like, yes, he killed all of those boys, but you know what? He always did his hair, like, always looked nice, like something ridiculous like that. Like, you can just make something good out of bad. And that's what she did. It was like, he was always such a kind person. It's like, but he wasn't, because he killed all those people.
Yeah.
Anyway, this little chilling bit of info comes from a Texas Monthly article written by James Conaway in April of 1976, and this was in interviews with, like, they were interviewing Henley while he was in jail. It's called The Last Kid on the Block, but this is an interesting little bit, and I don't know where they got this information, but this comes from that. 3 years before his death, his mother had sent him an inspirational book entitled This Thing Called You. She inscribed it, quote, "From your 54-year-old mother who has just begun to live. Read this book. Help me make up for the things I was too ignorant to teach you when I was in my 20s. 4 days before his death, Dean telephoned his mother in Colorado and told her he was in trouble, feared he was losing his mind, and might commit suicide. She sent him a box of candy."
Wow.
So, I mean, I feel like that says a lot about the two of them.
Yeah.
Just, they were not on the same wavelength. but really, really interesting. Anyway, I know I'm out of order here because I kind of had to go back for that. Anyway, okay. So after the closure of the candy company in 1968, Corll took what would be his last job as an electrician at the Houston Lighting and Power Company, where he tested electrical relay systems, and he was super well liked. Like, everybody he was very kind. He was a good worker. Nobody would have guessed anything about him. In fact, even the landlords where he committed all of these atrocities would even say things like he was the best tenant anyone could ask for. And this was after learning what he did in their apartments.
Yeah.
And they would still say that shit. Like, what? Seriously, y'all?
I mean,
but he was such a good tenant. Always paid his rent, I guess. I don't know. So he befriends Brooks. We just heard about that, but their escapades didn't end there, Avi. So this is from the Lost Boys again. On March 9th, Corll and Brooks spied 15-year-old Randall Harvey, who was riding his bike to work at a Finna station. Brooks, who knew Harvey well, was probably the one who persuaded the teenager to throw his bike into the back of Corll's vehicle and ride with him. Corll took Harvey to his apartment, raped him, tortured him, and then shot him in the head. Then he and Brooks took Harvey's body to the storage shed. 2.5 months later, they went after 2 boys on the north side of the Heights who were walking to the neighborhood swimming pool. One was 16-year-old Mally Winkle, who years earlier had worked at the Corll's candy factory with his mom. The other was 14-year-old David Hillegeist, who had gone to the candy factory one day as a boy and spent so much time there that his mother had shown up and made him come home. They were strangled at Corll's apartment and buried in the storage shed as well. These all happen really close together. So, side note, one of the neighborhood boys who came to the Hillegeists' home to inquire about David after he went missing was 15-year-old Elmer Wayne Henley, who lived a block and a half away. He asked Miss Hillegeist for some posters that he could put up around the Heights, but he swears up and down that he was not involved with Corll like that at this point. Not that he didn't know Dean, but he didn't know Dean like that.
yeah.
All right. But in 1971, Henley was introduced to Corll by Brooks, like that, someone he had known for a few years. He'd known Brooks for a few years. Surprisingly, Henley was struck by a sense of admiration for Dean just right away. Like, I like this guy. Henley said, and this is a quote, "Maybe Dean was considering me as one of his next victims, but we hit it off. He was the smart, clean-cut, nicely dressed man. He listened to me. He explained things to me. I'll be honest with you. It was important that Dean liked me. He was kind." I mean,
Interesting.
he knew how to, but isn't that like how cult leaders,
Yeah.
isn't that how they work? They're going to be so nice and kind, and you're going to feel so fucking important
Yeah.
until you're not really, you know?
But most of the rest of the world doesn't feel the same way about him. It seems like everyone thought Dean was just like this amazing, kind, good person. It's crazy how well he hid what he was doing.
Right. Yeah. Is that narcissism? Where I don't know. So uber charming to hide your shit.
They just manipulate.
Hide your shame. Okay, so much of the first year, according to Henley, was spent driving around the Heights, drinking beer, smoking pot, doing the thing. That's what you did. I mean, there's nothing else to do, right? They were planning like petty theft just to get some money here and there. But then Corll brought Henley into the business, as it were. He didn't immediately join in. Henley says that he waited like a couple of months before he actually took Corll up on the offer, because what he said was like he offered Henley in this pedophile quote unquote ring $200. He would say, if you bring me a kid, like a teenager, if you bring me a kid, I'll give you $200. And so it took him a couple of months to take him up on that offer, but he did. And then he admits later that he never got that sum again. He got it one time and he never got it again after that. Not that big of a sum. Not the $200.
That's what's important.
It wasn't important. Because it's like
I'm just saying that's what you should be upset about, is you didn't get your fucking money.
He wasn't upset about it.
Oh, okay.
He was.
I thought you were saying like, as in he was like complaining he did the work and didn't get the money.
Like I think there's some reporters or some people who say like it was obvious like it was about the money.
Yeah.
But like, was it about the money? Because he wasn't getting the money, or else he wasn't getting as much money as he thought he was getting.
Right.
But he was also out of school. He was also unemployed. He was also just kind of, he came from a very abusive household. He wasn't any better than Brooks, right? Yeah. But then again, he wasn't I like maybe he was just as twisted somewhere in there, because he, like, even Brooks said later that he enjoyed it. That Henley seemed to enjoy it.
Was Brooks jealous over Henley? Or will you be talking about that?
No, actually, no. No, I think that Brooks was just really different from Henley. Anyway, so in early 1972, he did accept Corll's offer because they were in dire financial circumstances. So the first abduction he participated in was on February 19th, 1972. And so it's either in February or March of 1972, depending on whose statement you're listening to. But anyway, because it all has to do with where he lived at this point. And so that doesn't really matter. So he picked up a boy on the corner of 11th and Studewood and lured him to Corll's home on the promise of smoking some pot with everybody. And then at Corll's place, he and Corll had prepared a ruse. And so Henley cuffed his own hands behind his back, freed himself with a key hidden in his back pocket, then duped the kid into donning the handcuffs before observing Corll bind and gag him. Henley then left the youth alone with Corll, believing he was to be sold into this sex slavery ring that Corll said he had. The identity of this first victim Henley assisted in the abduction remains unknown. That's one that's still unknown. 1 month later, March 24th, 1972, Henley, Brooks, and Corll, they encountered 18-year-old Frank Aguirre leaving a restaurant that he worked at on Yale Street, and got him to Corll's apartment. Aguirre agreed to follow them in his car to go smoke pot and drink beer. And then again, handcuffs were on the table, and that was all done. He was pushed him to the table. He handcuffed his hands behind the back, and Henley claims that he didn't know that that's what Corll wanted to do with Aguirre when they picked him up. But
yeah.
Anyway, there they are, burying the body all over again. Then on, because it was all bad. And then they buried him at High Island Beach. So despite the revelations that Corll was in reality killing all of these boys he and Brooks had assisted in abducting, Henley nonetheless became an active participant in the abductions and in the murders, because on April 20th, the following month, he assisted Corll and Brooks in abducting another youth, a 17-year-old named Mark Scott. Scott, who was well known to both Henley and Brooks, was grabbed by force, fought furiously against attempts by Corll to restrain him, even tried to attack him with a knife, but didn't get anywhere. Henley picked up a gun, pointed it at Mark, and Mark just saw it and just gave up and put his hands up and stopped fighting and died. He was also buried at High Island Beach. Brooks later stated, like I said earlier, that, quote, he was especially sadistic starting about this time, that Henley was especially sadistic, that he seemed, Henley later admitted in gradually becoming fascinated, this is in quotes, with how much stamina people have. Like, he's like, you see people get, like, he needs a new battery.
I don't know.
You see people in movies get strangled, and it seems to happen really quick. And he said it felt like it would take two of us 30 minutes to do it.
Jesus Christ.
He even said that at one point, and this might have been the kid, like, while he was being strangled, he was like, just shoot me, like with his finger, like putting his the index finger and thumb up, like just tapping, because it was taking so long and it was so painful. It's awful. Gross. On June 26th, Henley assisted Corll and Brooks again in the abduction and murder of two youths named Billy Balk and Johnny Delhomme. They were both tied to Corll's bed, and they were,
killed after all the things that happened in between. They were also buried at High Island Beach. So when Corll lived at this Schuler Street, the trio lured a 19-year-old named William Reitinger to the house, and that was another one. And that was in the summer of 1972. He killed another 2 victims, 17-year-old Stephen Sickman, who was last seen leaving a party in the Heights shortly before midnight on July 19th. And I'm not going to go into how that happened. Approximately a month later, on or about August 21st, a 19-year-old named Roy Bunton was abducted while walking to his job at a shoe store. And I don't have to tell you about what happened to him because it's also horrible. Neither youth was named by either Brooks or Henley as a Corll victim, and both youth were identified victims only in 2011, those last 2. Because they kept finding forensics and things like that. On October 3rd, 1972, Henley and Brooks encountered 2 Heights teenagers named Wally J. Semino and Richard Hembry walking to Hembry's home. Semino and Hembry were enticed into Brooks's Corvette and driven to Corll's Westcott Towers apartment. He moved again. And that evening, Semino is known to have phoned his mother. And all he got out was, "Mama!" And they hung it up. So it was because of that call that the police were like, well, he was just probably calling to tell you he was fine, and he ran away.
Oh my God.
It's so frustrating. So sometime the following month, it's awful. Sometime the following month, 18-year-old Oak Forest youth known to Corll and Henley named William Branch disappeared while hitchhiking from Mount Pleasant to Houston. On November 15th, a 19-year-old Spring Branch youth named Richard Kepner disappeared on his way to a phone booth. Altogether, I'm skipping all of the details because no one needs to hear any of it anymore. Altogether, at least 10 teenagers between the ages of 13 and 19 were murdered between February and November of 1972. They were prolific. 5 of whom were buried at High Island Beach and 5 inside the boat shed. And it wasn't like this boat shed was huge. It was like one on top of another, kind of scooched in, so like they were all, basically just piled kind of all around together. And it was smelly. On one of the reasons why his mom said he couldn't have been the one to do it was because he let his friends and family use that boat shed to store a boat or something like that. Like why would he have done that if he was using it to bury people? I don't know. I know, it doesn't make sense. On January 20th, 1973, Corll moved to an address on Wirt Road in the Spring Branch district of Houston. Within 2 weeks of moving into this address, he had killed 17-year-old Joseph Lyles. Lyles was known to both Corll and Brooks. He had lived on Antoine Drive, the same street upon which Brooks resided in 1973. On March 1st, Corll vacated his Wirt Road apartment. He briefly resided in an apartment in South Post Oak Road before moving to 2020 Lamar Drive, an address his father had vacated in Pasadena. So I'm just going to go through this next set since we're running so late. February 1st, Joseph Allen Lyles, 17. So we went through that. His remains located August 1983 and identified in November of 2009. Crazy, right? June 4th, William Ray Lawrence, 15, a friend of Henley who phoned his father to ask if he could go fishing with some friends. He was kept alive by Corll for 3 days before being strangled with a cord, and he was buried at Lake Sam Rayburn. June 15th, Raymond Stanley Blackburn, 20, a married man from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, who vanished while hitchhiking from... Why does he always leave during our show? Always.
He just knows.
I know. A married man from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, who vanished while hitchhiking from the Heights to see his newborn child. Blackburn had arrived in Houston 3 months before his abduction to work on a construction project, and he was strangled by Corll at the 2020 Lamar Drive residence. And he was also buried at Lake Sam Rayburn. July 7th, Homer Luis Garcia, 15, met Henley while both youths were enrolled at a Bel Air driving school. He was shot in the head and chest. He was also buried at Lake Sam Rayburn. July 12th, John Manning Sellers, 17, an Orange County youth killed 2 days before his 18th birthday. He was killed by 4 gunshots to the chest, and he was buried at High Island Beach. He was the only victim to be buried fully clothed. That says a lot. July 19th, Michael Anthony Balch, 15. Corll had already killed his older brother, Billy. You probably remember that name. The previous year. He was also at Lake Sam Rayburn, and his remains weren't identified until September 2010. Marty Ray Jones on July 25th. He was 18. He was last seen along with his friend and roommate Charles Cobble walking down 27th Street in the company of Henley, and he was strangled with a Venetian blind cord and buried in the boat shed. He. Charles Ray Cobble, 17. He was shot twice in the head and also in the boat shed. August 3rd, James Stanton Dramala, 13, was last seen riding his bike in Pasadena. He last called his parents to tell them he was at a party across town. He was strangled, buried in the boat shed. So that brings us to how this whole nightmare ends. On August 8th, 1973, Henley arrived at Corll's with his buddy Tim Curley and his new girlfriend Rhonda Williams, a popular girl from the Heights, whose previous boyfriend had been Frank Aguirre, whom Henley had brought to Corll more than a year before. Henley insists he didn't bring his friends over to Corll's to be attacked. It was just supposed to be a night of fun. This is from the Lost Boys article again. In the living room, they drank beer, and Henley and Curley bagged some paint, so sniffed, I don't know if everyone knows what that is, but sniffing the fumes from acrylic paint out of a paper bag. But after they fell asleep or passed out or whatever, Corll went on the attack. He hogtied all 3 of them and gagged Curley and Williams. He kicked Williams over and over in the ribs. Then he carried Henley into the kitchen to let him know just how angry he was that Henley had brought a girl to his home. After Henley promised to murder Williams, Corll untied him. They returned to the living room, Corll carrying his .22 pistol and Henley a knife with an 18-inch blade. Corll first dragged a terrified Curley to a back bedroom, then returned for Williams. He tied both of them to his torture board and started to sexually assault Curley. A sheet of plastic covered the floor. Suddenly, Henley grabbed Corll's gun. He aimed it at Dean, says Williams, who regularly visits a psychiatrist to deal with the post-traumatic stress disorder she says she still endures from that night. And he said, "I can't go on any longer. I can't have you kill all my friends." And he shot him. Whatever evil was in Wayne, there was still some good in him, and finally the good won. Wayne saved my life, and he saved Tim's life too. Wayne killed the devil. Whew. She also said in an interview in 2013 to ABC, so recounting his actions on the morning of August 8th, Henley, was afraid that he wasn't going to be able to save me. So he was going to sit down with me, just lay down with me like we've been doing when we talked. And he was going to put the gun to my head while we were talking, and then he was just going to shoot me. So that wouldn't be traumatic, I guess.
Yeah.
For her. Fucking hell. I don't know how you get over shit like that.
I am surprised she's still alive.
So, over the years, 27 victims were eventually identified. 5 decades later, the last one found is still only known as John Doe, 1973. And just on the 50th anniversary, forensic scientists with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, or NCMEC, it's easier to say the whole thing, I guess, are determined to put a name with the victim's face. So investigators believe that he was between 15 and 18 years old, and there'll be a picture when we post, but the link will also be in the show notes. He would have been between 15 and 18 at the time of his death, and likely had been dead about a year before he was found. He had brown hair, approximately 7 inches long, with brown eyes. The victim also had a mild form of spina bifida, I don't know, which may have caused him lower back pain or affected his stride, but it's also possible it didn't cause any noticeable symptoms. They also worked with the Harris County Institute of Forensic Scientists to create digital reconstructions of the items found with John Doe. There was red, blue, and turquoise striped Catalina swim trunks with a silver buckle that had wings on it, a 70s style khaki long sleeve shirt with a large peace sign over red, white, and blue USA on the back, and brown cowboy boots with the word Neolite on the heel. 50 years after the murder spree, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children is asking anyone who may have information on John Doe 1973 or the items he was discovered with to come forward. If you have information on John Doe 1973, please call 1-800-THE-LOST or the Harris County Institute of Forensic Scientists and reference case number ML733356. So an update on Brooks and Henley. Brooks died of COVID in 2020, a severe case of COVID. And just last August, a year ago, Henley was asking the courts for compassionate release. So that would be either he has a terminal illness or he's just really sick and needs to be in like a long-term care facility. Mm-hmm. But he was denied. So he'll die soon enough, I guess. Either way. But the family all petitioned that he not be released, that he stay in jail. And that is the Candyman story 2.0 with all its new revelations.
It said that no one reported John Doe 1973 as missing.
Well, if you're interested in reading the theory as to why, the opinion article piece that just came out about that there was some concern that if those kids were gay, or like would they be considered gay, or like if they were hanging out with him, if this was someone that they knew, that kind of thing, like the stigma of that back then.
Yeah.
And then a lot of times, like they might have just been from single family, like a broken home, like it was just the mom. And a lot of these families didn't do well.
Yeah.
There were a lot of families that really spiraled into madness, into addiction, into, families that weren't already divorced, just the amount of guilt that some of the parents had, like, what if I didn't do that? Should I have done that? Didn't, that kind of thing. It's just,
I just can't believe the police either. Like, they all ran away and didn't even try to investigate until the last incident. I mean, until, it was off. It's like too late.
So this is from that article. Some parents seemed afraid to come forward to make IDs because of the stigma attached to the crimes. A handful of leads that came from men with ties to the gay community drew either ridicule or little attention. 1973 incident reports show. Some press coverage seemed to suggest that every gay man in Houston was somehow responsible, prompting the city's first gay newspaper, the Nuncius, to declare in 1974, quote, "Does Dean Corll represent all homosexuals or madman? Should all left-handers, shadowless people, and heterosexuals that veer from the norm be exterminated before they can lay their eggs or hatch a new generation of sex thrill killers?" Saying like, we aren't the only ones who are serial killers.
Yeah.
Like, seriously. But yeah, there's also photographs that were found of at least 11 of the victims. So who was taking those photos? Because there was somebody else helping.
You mean besides Brooks
and Henley? Like there wasn't.
Oh.
Yeah, there was all kinds of things. Like there must have been other people involved. And what if there was this sex weird porn? I mean, is that so far-fetched now? Like child pornography, child sex trafficking? Is that like, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and it's people are on the dark web doing that now. We hear about people doing that kind of shit all the time. And what if that was just the beginnings of it?
Yeah.
You know, it's there. And then as much as, and you said like, you know, when we said earlier, like that there might be 30, maybe 40, because at a certain point they just stopped digging. And the police were like, do you need to find more? What does it matter? Wow. And they just were like, you're missing some. And they just stopped. They just stopped counting because it was already such a stain on the city.
Yeah.
And it was an embarrassment that the police didn't fucking do anything.
Yeah.
So they were like, oh my gosh, the body count is just going too high. Stop it. And so they just stopped. And then like, how are we going to find all these people? Yeah. And then 50 years down the road, you're not going to open up these cold cases. We don't have the manpower or the resources to do that. But like, why not? There's still such a backlog of those cases. And now, you know.
Yeah.
And so even in, actually in 2021, on August 8th, 2021, our dude, Tim Miller with Texas EquiSearch, he was out there with trying to use that, like, I don't know what it's called, where they were like trying to see below the surface of the ground to see if they could see with like infrared or whatever, to go back to those spots and see if there aren't more bodies there, you know. But after Hurricane Ike, like that beach, who knows?
Yeah.
If it got worse or, you know, for that kind of stuff. So it's not that they've stopped looking necessarily, but there's just not as many resources.
Yeah.
And it's just sad. If they had just kept digging in that shed, that's still there. If they had just, you know, that 2020 Lamar, this year in February, they finally bulldozed that thing to the ground. And that was still up.
Yeah.
You know, like there's so many things like that's all still there where he lived. It's crazy. You know, they still think that there might be 20 more bodies out there, and there's nothing that they can do about it. So that's it.
Wow.
Damn. Right? Damn.
On a lighter note, Glenn commented on the post and said, if Ashley did the story, it's about to be hilarious.
But it wasn't. It wasn't. It was the opposite of hilarious.
I'm just telling you. So he does still pay attention to us, our friend Glenn. So.
No one else was wondering about that, but.
There's a little kitty. Hi. There's a new kitty in the studio.
And this one just likes to meow too. What? Anyway, so and anything to say to the audience before
we just thank you again for the gift, Anna.
Thank you. I'm so excited. So, and then what else do people have to do? Anna. Yeah.
I just want to make sure because I tend to pronounce things wrong, so I just.
Oh, so now we have to ask her because I don't know. I just read it.
Okay. Well, I'm
Anna,
sorry
Anna.
for pronouncing your name wrong. The gifts are lovely. I love them.
Thank you. Okay, so what else?
I will be posting the contest soon that I mentioned last week. I'll be getting that up on our Facebook with the pictures of the prints that you can win, the artwork stuff.
And then are you going to tell us now how we can win them, or are you going to post it?
I will post it
and then
in
talk
case
about
I change my mind.
Oh, okay.
But I think we agreed. I think what we want to do is have you guys leave us reviews on whatever streaming platform you listen to us on and screenshot us where you left the review. and then we'll put everyone's name into a drawing and draw a winner. But I will post the official rules and what you have to do and the artwork that you'll be winning to see if you even want to win it. There's 10 prints total, and they're very nice. But anyways, I'll post all of that on our Facebook and get it out there for you guys.
Can I win one?
Well, I was going to give it away as like a package deal.
Oh, like all 10?
Yeah, all 10.
Oh, one winner, not 10 winners.
I mean, if you want to do 10 winners, we could, but I feel like we should do, you win one big art print package of these, because they're like horror themed, they're all different themed.
Fun.
And so I'll post what those are.
I'm so excited. Yeah. Okay, what are you doing for us next week?
I don't know. I did put it on the spreadsheet. I think it's
I already messed up the spreadsheet.
Oh well,
yeah.
I think it's an Australian story.
Australian.
Yeah, about a unsolved serial killer from Australia, perhaps.
Ooh, perchance.
I could be just totally speaking out my ass right now, but I think that's what I'm doing. I think that's what I put on the spreadsheet. He has an interesting name, but I don't want to say it because I don't want people to like go and look it up. Anywho.
Well,
that's all I have.
I can't wait. So until next week, if you see something, say something. Don't take candy from strangers.
Don't give your address out like I did to strangers.
We got a nice
We did
gift.
get it. It worked out this time, yes.
Thank goodness.
Anyway, it's all right.
Anyway, all right. So until next week, we will see you later. Bye.